Previously, on Vince Lombardi, A Football Life.
I don't think you can understand Lombardi without understanding the role of religion in his life.
I am convinced they're not going to hire a head coach who's Italian-American.
Marie started to enjoy drinking because Vin wasn't there.
Vince worked so hard to get where he got. Failure could not be an option.
For the second straight year, the Green Bay Packers have won the National Football League championship.
It's a game for madmen, and I'm the biggest madman of them all.
You're going to be a football player when you grow up.
Today is the best day of your life. Believe it.
He might be the finest quarterback produced in the last 10 years.
He needs a day like this. That's all I need.
Fortunately for me, I didn't lose my life. I didn't lose my job. Football convinced me that life is a team game.
Rest of your life. Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do
it. On the field and off, life with Vince Lombardi had become a day-to-day proposition.
When he came up the stairs, if he smiled at us and said good morning, we knew we were going to have a fairly decent day. But if he ignored us, we kept our heads down, we didn't talk to him, just left him alone that day.
He was so bipolar. Of course, we didn't know. One minute he'd be up here, the next minute he'd be down here. When he got out of control, I ran to the basement. You know, turn the radio on and just stay away.
Son Vincent had spent his adolescence at his father's side.
Thank you, Vincent.
Being the son of Vince Lombardi wasn't easy, even when Vincent left to play football at the College of St. Thomas in Minnesota.
My freshman year in college, I hurt my knee. I'm obviously not playing, I'm not practicing. And they come up to play the Vikings. And he gives me a big hug, a big smile, and how you doing and everything. But he also has in the room with him Dr. Jim Nellen, who is the team's orthopedic guy. And I go in the bedroom with Nellen, and he takes my knee, and he comes out and tells my dad there's nothing structurally wrong. He's just, ligaments are stretched. My dad goes from smile, he jumps me like nobody's business. God, he jumps me. You're going to run out that thing tomorrow. Quit babying it, yada. And now I got tears running down my cheeks. But ran out it the next day, and I got in the starting lineup as a freshman about 2 weeks later. He knew better than I.
With Vincent gone, the house took on an almost eerie silence.
You could hear a pin drop in our kitchen table. My mother was quiet, my father was quiet, and we just ate our dinner. I traveled with this team. That was my father's way of keeping the family together. So my suitcase laid on the floor open 12 months out of the year. I hated it. But who was I going to tell I hated it? Daddy, I hate this?
Only one person was able to handle that chore.
My mother was the only person who could talk back to my father and get his attention.
We loved her. God, we loved her because we couldn't say anything to him. All he did is win all the time. She could.
One of the most common phrases that you could hear out of Vince Lombardi's mouth was, "Shut up, Marie." But like many marriages, he would say that in public, and then he would do exactly what she instructed him to do in private.
But it was Marie who had left her life in New York for the sake of her husband's career.
She knew that she couldn't really compete with football, and I think that sense of emptiness manifested itself in her being depressed and becoming an alcoholic.
My mother had a drinking problem. And when things got unhappy, she'd drink.
I think my dad was not all that sympathetic. I think he saw it as a weakness, that something, you should be able to control.
On at least one occasion, Marie was unable to, as Vincent discovered when he brought home his new fiancée.
He comes home to announce he's engaged, and Marie has overdosed on pills and drinking.
I never put my finger on it until subsequent. I didn't at the time. Okay, she's sick in the hospital. I should have known my dad was falling all over himself to compensate for it.
Through thick and thin, Vince and Ree, as he called her, did have a love affair. She was completely devoted to him to the end.
God forbid she missed a football game. She never missed one. Not one.
God, family, and the Green Bay Packers. This was the trinity that defined Lombardi's life. In what order was never clear.
Here he was, a very imperfect man, trying to create something perfect. And the more he tried to create something perfect, the more he understood his own imperfections. And I think that's what he tried to deal with in church.
It was very strange. My father went to church 365 days of the year. He never missed.
Lombardi's day began at St. Willibrod's. Anyone who went there while the coach was in attendance might have been surprised at what they found.
So we're all in the front row. The priest comes in, and who's the altar boy? The Coach Lombardi. We looked at each other like, holy crap, this guy does everything. And to this day, I believe the priest kept looking at Lombardi like, am I doing it right?
I'm a highly emotional man. I'm quick to tears and I'm quick to praise. I'm quick to all of the things. I think anyone who tries to hide their emotions, I think makes a mistake. I think you've got to do things according to your own personality. This is all part of whatever little bit of success I've had, too. I think this is most important.
Everybody grabbing out there. Nobody tackling. Just grabbing, everybody. Grab, grab, grab.
Vince Lombardi wore his emotions on his sleeve, and his players had no trouble recognizing them.
Nobody could yell like he did all the time. A lot of time was for effect, clearly. I saw him one time kind of practicing some facial stuff in the mirror. You know, a grimace, a growl.
Henry Jordan had one of the famous lines about Lombardi, he treats us all alike like dogs. It's a great line, and it's completely wrong.
Come on, Henry Jordan, you're just laying on it.
He treated every one of them differently. He treated Henry Jordan like a dog, because that's how he'd get the most out of Jordan, just by getting him mad.
He just played us like a maestro.
Every play you're graded. In a grading system, if a guy blocks you and you get out of the block and you make the tackle for no gain, that's a 0. You did what you're supposed to do. Now, if he blocks you and you don't get out of the block, you stay blocked, that's a -2. He dogged people so much, when he gave you a compliment, even if it's just a little small one, you just took it and said, hey, he likes me. My dad always said, never let a white man pat your head. But Vince Lombardi, when he needs something good, he walk up behind you, he hit you back here, like here, behind your head, like here. And I love it, man. I said, hey. He didn't pat you on the head, he hit you right in the back of the neck. It's kind of like his seal of approval.
Behind Lombardi's irascibility lay a deep-rooted belief that it took more than bullying to produce a team of champions.
There's a certain togetherness here that is not true in many other fields. I gave it a word. There has to be a great deal of love for each other.
He was the first coach that I ever heard refer to love in the locker room. He really believed that there was a Christian love that he could incorporate into the team. The love that binds his players together, the love that comes out of sacrifice.
Here we go, let's go. Come on, one for all for one. Let's go now.
During the radically changing 1960s, Lombardi's love for his players was put to the test.
Vince was colorblind. He didn't care who it was.
He made Dave Robinson the first black linebacker in Packer history, and then offered his support to Robinson's roommate, Lionel Aldridge, during a critical time in his life.
Lionel gave me an engagement ring, but I couldn't wear it, and I had to hide it, and I couldn't tell anybody that I was engaged to him. At that point in time, it wasn't really legal for black and whites to marry. There was a player that had married interracially a couple years before Lionel and I were thinking about it. And he'd been blackballed from all of football. So Lionel wanted to know what Lombardi's reaction would be.
Vince called him in because he'd gotten complaints about Lionel importing this white girl to Green Bay. And then Lionel told him, he said that he wanted to marry her, but he was afraid of being blackballed.
And Lombardi told him, I don't care who you marry, as long as you play good football, you keep your nose clean. Lionel called me and said, wow, I walked out of there just like shaking my head thinking, oh my gosh. He said, yeah, I still have a job so we can get married.
When he came back to me from Vince, he came right to me and told me, he said, Vince told me Vicky and I can get married. He was happy as a lot.
The issue of prejudice was especially sensitive for Lombardi given his own past. And when several team owners learned of the situation, he remained adamant in his support of Aldridge.
Pete Rozelle, the commissioner of football, got wind of it. And to Lombardi's credit, said, this is my team. You can't tell me what to do with my team. They can do what they want as long as it's okay by me. He just was amazing in the fact that if he believed in something, he fought for it.
By 1965, the bond that Vince Lombardi had cultivated with his players translated to success on the field. After missing the playoffs 2 years in a row, his Packers were winners again and met the Cleveland Browns for the NFL title. The game was no contest.
Starr takes the ball, hands off to Hawning, sweep to the left side, he's got the block, he's inside the 10, he's at the 5, cuts into the end zone for the touchdown. The Green Bay Packers are the National Football League champions for 1965.
Lombardi was about to take his team on a historic run. A year later, the Packers lost just 2 games and advanced to the NFL championship for the second straight year. The title match was in Dallas against the Cowboys and old friend Tom Landry.
Vince was very, very intense when he played against Landry. It's almost like I'm playing against my brother. I want to show him who's the boss.
Vince always felt that Tom's complicated offense, under pressure, someone was going to screw up.
That's precisely what happened. With Dallas trailing by a touchdown in the closing minutes, an offsides penalty pushed the Cowboys back to the Packers' 6-yard line. With 45 seconds remaining, Dallas was down to its last chance.
If the Cowboys go in here and kick the extra point, we're going into overtime. They've got one play to travel 2 yards. Meredith takes the ball, rolls out to the right. He's going to be nailed. Intercepted. A pass away, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Tom Brown.
The hero of the play was Dave Robinson, who had pressured Don Meredith into throwing the game-winning interception.
I had really played it wrong. If I had missed Meredith, he could have walked in. Defense is seek and destroy, and I just knew this was the time that I could go get him, so I did. But it wasn't the way it's drawn up on the playboard. Consequently, Vince Lombardi gave me a -2 on the play.
The Packers were again champions of the NFL, but their celebration was short-lived. Pro football supremacy was about to be contested in the first Super Bowl, pitting Green Bay against the Kansas City Chiefs, the rival AFL. Lombardi and his Packers would be representing much more than just Green Bay.
Now he gets a letter from Wellington Mara. And the letter says, Vince, you know what this game means to us. I couldn't think of any other general I would want to take the NFL Army into battle than you in Super Bowl I.
The telegrams and calls and everything else they got put more pressure on him. The guy was absolutely just wound tighter than, to say, the nuts on a new bridge. He was just, he was uptight.
The game was far short of a sellout, but Lombardi's biggest concern was protecting the honor of the NFL.
I want you to be proud of your profession. It's a great profession. You be proud of this game, and you can do a great deal for football today. Great deal for all the players in the league and everything else. Go out there and play this ball game like I know you can play it. Let's go!
Third down and a long four. Dawson being rushed and falls. And down the sidelines comes Willie Wood.
The final score read 35-10. Lombardi had accomplished what his NFL brethren had asked of him. But he was in no mood to celebrate, not with a bigger dream spurring him on.
I didn't get the feeling in '63 that he was going for 3 in a row, but in '67, he didn't let you forget it. Vince was a man of a single purpose, winning 3 consecutive world championships.
On NFL, a football.
Each year, you have different motivating features, and at this particular time, we're going to try to repeat.
No modern-day NFL team had ever won 3 championships in a row, and Vince Lombardi's attempt at the feat didn't come easy. The Packers were aging and racked with injuries. They looked exhausted, as did their head coach.
He drove himself and he drove his players and coaches to the point where he'd had it. You know, I thought he had just absolutely burned himself out.
I compared him to a president of the United States who is in office as a young man. He's fresh-faced, and he's, all bright-eyed and everything. And after about 3 years, he looks haggard, and he looks gray, and he looks worn, and he looks aged. In '67, Coach Lombardi looked that way. He looked gray, and he looked tired.
Lombardi's health was deteriorating. He had ulcers, he had stomach problems. He might have had other more serious problems. Several times his friends urged him to get a colonoscopy. And in the horrible, immortal last words, he said, "I'm not going to let somebody stick that up my ass."
Hobbled though they were, Lombardi's Packers pressed on and returned to the NFL championship game for a rematch with the Dallas Cowboys.
The Vince Lombardi Show, featuring the head
Let's
coach.
look ahead to Sunday. The Dallas Cowboys and for the whole works.
That's right, Al. This is the big game of the year, and we're real happy we're going to play it in Green Bay. Let me say that, and our field is going to be in good shape because unless something happens to that electric blanket we have out there.
Coach Lombardi invested a great sum of money out on the electric coils that went underneath Lambeau Field. They were designed to keep the field from freezing, obviously, and it was a new concept.
He said, "Let me tell you what we did to this field." He's got this city of wires underneath the turf. Throw the switch, everything's going to melt, we're going to be fine, the field's going to be in good condition.
That was Lombardi's baby, and he just loved to show people this control panel downstairs. It looked like something you'd see in a submarine, or there were all these handles and valves and cranks and all this stuff.
We're all in there and the lights are blinking. He's a mad scientist. He doesn't know a damn thing about it. And it says field electrified.
This is my pride and joy out here, this field here. Let's not cut it up.
Lombardi was the world's greatest control freak. There's no question about that. But the one thing he couldn't control was weather.
As the sun rose on game day, Lombardi had become as helpless as the ground beneath him.
The field, it had been covered the night before. The heat was coming up through the ground and bringing the moisture with it. And as they peeled the tarp off, the field was damp, and it was fairly soft. But as the cold worked on it, it started to freeze. And you could just see the field turning color, starting in the north end zone and going to the south. And all of a sudden we think, oh my God, Coach Lombardi's field is frozen.
Finally, they turned to Chuck Lane and said, "Chuck, you better go and tell Coach."
I'd probably been better off telling him that Marie was running around on him.
He was just livid. Not because of the players playing on ice. He looked bad.
And Lombardi's looking at the field, and he says, "It's going to be all right." That's terrible. It's just terrible.
The stage was set for a game that even before kickoff had earned its nickname, the Ice Bowl.
The field grew worse as the game wore on, and it was a skating rink more than a football field.
The Packers took a 14-0 lead. And then, as wind chill temperatures reached minus 38 degrees, their offense froze.
Footing was so bad, and the hands were so cold, and the receivers catching the ball was difficult. So one score could make a big difference.
The pitch out to Reeves. He'll throw the option pass way downfield. It is complete to Lance Ritzel. He's at the 10, the 5, and into the end zone for the touchdown. And it's the Dallas Cowboys 17, the Green Bay Packers 14. And the Packers have got their work cut out for them now.
I hate to say it, but I had lost faith in the offense. I really had, because they hadn't done a thing. They had shut the offense down completely.
So we get the ball, 4.5 minutes to go. We got 65 yards to go to score.
Starr takes the snap. He's back to throw. He's got the time. Flips out to the right side to Donnie Anderson. Gets by one man. He's at the 40-yard line. And down.
And they started moving.
Flips the pass. It's complete to Chuck Mercedes. He's at the 25, the 20, down to the 15, and out of bounds at about the 11-yard line. There's a minute and 11 seconds remaining in this game.
In the most adverse conditions they had ever faced, the Packers moved down the field in 9 plays and into position to score a game-winning touchdown.
Actually, I was looking for a suggestion from Jerry Kramer, Forrest Gregg, as to what particular type of play and what kind of blocking that we should particularly run in that area.
Only even block is big odd one.
Yeah, probably odd blocking.
The players spotted a weakness in Dallas defensive lineman Jethro Pugh.
I said, we can wedge Pugh if we have to. He goes, what? I said, we can wedge Pugh if we have to. That's right.
I didn't cut Pugh off. Pugh goes down easy.
Even, so he can get on the middle.
Even, yeah.
All right.
It's a give and take. I'm not the complete autocrat here, do you see, as everybody thinks.
The Packers had identified their target, but the real enemy was the ice.
So we called the play twice. The backs were slipping and sliding and couldn't get back to the line of scrimmage.
The handoff goes to Donnie Anderson. He's not in. The Packers call time again.
And then we take our final timeout, and Bart asked me if I could make a block.
Can you get your footing for one more wedge play?
Yeah, I can. I think so.
So I ran to the sideline, got over there, and I said, Coach, there's nothing wrong with the play. I said, the backs simply can't get to the line of scrimmage because the ground is so hard there. I said, I'm standing upright. I can shuffle my feet and lunge in. All he said at that time was, well, then run it, and let's get the hell out of here. And I'm laughing like I am now, going back to the huddle. And I'm trying to not let anybody see me laughing because it just broke me up. That was his response.
That's all the timeouts the Green Bay Packers have. They are still inches away from that goal line.
On 3rd down with 16 seconds to go, Lombardi gambled everything on one last play.
And Landry would have called a rollout, and a lot of people would have called a rollout.
Watch that star now, come on. Grab him if he fakes it.
Lombardi wanted to run the wedge play. And if you can't gain a yard, you don't deserve to be champions.
Here are the Packers. 3rd down, inches to go. To Bader. Starr begins the count. Takes the snap. He's got the quarterback sneak, and the Green Bay Packers are going to be NFL champions for the 3rd straight year.
My perspective on the last drive in the Ice Bowl is that is the culmination of everything Lombardi and his Packers had been preparing for all of those 9 years together.
We got a little commitment, a little discipline, a little perseverance, a little preparation, a little consistency, a little intensity. We reached down, we got a little bit of Lombardi.
Coach, we're going to
Brookshire is interviewing Coach Lombardi.
Slow motion now as Jerry Kramer makes a key block for Bart Starr on this quarterback sneak for the winning touchdown.
And he runs a play, and Coach goes,
Way to go, Jerry! Way to go!
Nobody got a -2 on the final play of the Ice Bowl. But even as Lombardi had accomplished his goal of winning 3 straight titles, he was strangely detached.
The story's outside, nothing here.
We get in the car, and he turns to me and says, "You just saw me coach my next to last football game."
Super Bowl II would be the final game Lombardi coached as a Packer. In beating the Raiders, Lombardi went out a champion. He had done what no other NFL coach had accomplished, winning 5 titles in 9 years. 2 weeks later, the Lombardi era officially ended.
Gentlemen, let me introduce to you the new head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Phil Bankston.
I think that in part it was the accumulation of the stress. I think it was partly his health. I think he was afraid, honestly, about...
No longer head coach, Vince Lombardi was confined to the front office, where he concentrated on executive duties.
Jets aren't doing so good, are they?
With his workload cut in half, he also had plenty of time for personal appearances.
Most times, streets are named after the deceased. I hope this is not... I just want you to know I'm not dead.
Lombardi had become an icon.
Richard Nixon was once contemplating putting him on his ticket as vice president in 1968.
And of course, Vince Lombardi. I thought of...
But in fact, Lombardi was a Kennedy Democrat.
His message, which had made him so successful on the football field,
Operate on Lombardi time.
resonated with business leaders and the after-dinner crowd.
But once you have won their hearts, they'll follow you anywhere.
But in time, Lombardi grew uncomfortable with the one message that had come to define him.
Winning isn't everything, but it's the only thing. In our business, there is no second place. Either you're first or you're last.
He told me one day, I wish the hell I'd never said that. I said, well, don't you believe it? He said, what I believe is, if you go out on a football field on Sunday or any other endeavor in life, and you leave every fiber of what you have on that field when the game finally ends, then you've won. And to me, that tells a lot more than the final score. And I never made that clear.
What's the one thing you want from each and every man who plays for you?
I want him to give 100% on every play that he is in as far as the Packers are concerned.
But when his appearances were over, he went back to an office and not a football field.
I think at that point he realized that he'd made a heck of a mistake.
You'd see him on the practice field just wandering around and looking, and you're going, I turned to my mother, I said, Mom, he's so depressed. He just walks, shoulders over like, well, I can't say anything, and I see some things that are going on wrong. And he'd walk, and he'd walk, and he'd walk. It killed him.
He's an old lion that was away from the pride.
They actually had to soundproof the booth in Lambeau Field that he would stand to watch the Packers because he was yelling so much. They didn't want the press to hear it.
I could hear the beating on the wall when the Packers were screwing up, you know.
With the Packers headed for their first losing season since Lombardi's arrival, their old coach finally spoke to his team.
He went in and talked to him, and I was sitting at the desk doing some work and talking on the phone, and he came in, so it was just he and I in there. And he said, there's a damn many things I wanted to say to him. He said, I don't know why I have to whip him all the time. And I said, Coach, you trained him with the whip, you can't put it down. He said, yeah. And all of a sudden he takes his chair, he was just inside the door, he takes it over and puts it facing into the corner. And he breaks down and cries. He just bawled like a baby. There's so damn many things I wanted to tell him.
I was sitting at my desk one day and he called me in to take dictation, and I thought it was just regular dictation, and all of a sudden I realized he is dictating his letter of resignation to me. I was into a couple of lines and I thought, oh my God, he's actually leaving.
I'm under contract with the Packers as a general manager for the next 5 years, and I've asked for release from that contract to take a position with the Washington Redskins as their executive officer, also a coach, and also for a substantial position with equity.
It was like, God is here. It was amazing.
In spite of what some of you may think, I can't walk across the Potomac even when it's frozen.
Like the Packers in '58, the Redskins were one of the worst teams in the NFL. They needed a miracle and were counting on Lombardi to bring them one. Reaching into his past to bring the Redskins into the future, he met with one-time Giants linebacker Sam Huff, who had recently retired from the Redskins.
I said to Coach Lombardi, I want to come back and play, and I can coach the linebackers and play for you. And Lombardi said, you think you could get another year or two? And I said, I know I can for you.
The Redskins already had their Bart Starr and gifted but free-spirited Sonny Jurgensen.
He wasn't talking about rebuilding and going down the road to win. He was talking about now. He was talking about right then. And you believe that. He made everybody believe in his program.
Lombardi had never had a losing season and wasn't about to start now. In '69, he coached the Redskins to their first winning record in 14 years. With Jurgensen leading the way, they won 7 games, the same win total posted by Lombardi's first team in Green Bay.
Just to have the chance to play for him. That was the highlight of my whole career. I'm glad I had that experience. If I'd have had it longer, it would have been cheating because it was easy.
With the stress of the season still lingering, Lombardi went to Green Bay to see old friends.
He comes over the house and greeted him outside with a nice big hug and handshake, and we come inside to take him on a cook's tour of the home. And my wife said, Coach, none of this would have been possible without you. He gets up, tears are coming from his eyes. He goes across the room, gives my wife a great big hug, turns around, hugs me, and goes out the front door.
I was in the office looking at films, and he was coming down the hallway. And he looked terrible. And I said, Coach, are you okay? And he said, no, Sam. He said, I really feel sick. And I said, well, why don't you go see the team doctor? And he did.
Washington Redskins coach Vince Lombardi had a 2-foot section of his colon removed today after surgeons discovered a tumor during an exploratory operation.
In late July, Lombardi addressed the Redskins before a preseason game.
I'll never forget it. He said, I want you guys to know why I brought you here. From now on, I'm not going to be with you. But by God, you're going to be a winner.
The next day, on July 27th, Lombardi was readmitted to Georgetown University Hospital for a second surgery.
I remember getting a call, follow-up, that the surgery wasn't successful and that he was terminal.
When word got out about Lombardi's condition, legions of disciples began a pilgrimage to Washington.
Every Green Bay Packer went to say goodbye to him. And all the Washington Redskins, the Giants. And once it all came out that the coach was going to die, those players flocked in there like, it was like, I have to say goodbye.
I go in and he said, you know, I've been lying here thinking about this. American Football Conference runs a lot of 34 defense instead of the 4-3 defense in the NFC. And I'm going, here's a man that, you know, it's just, I don't know how long he has to live. And he's sitting there thinking about ways to beat defenses.
It was 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening when I went into his room. He opened his eyes and looked at me, and I went over and took his hand and told him how much I appreciated our time together and that he'd had a great impact on my life. And I loved him for that.
I took the train down, and he was actually alone. He knew who I was, and he kind of laughed, and I squeezed his arm. And we talked about the weather or anything. What do you say? And I remember grabbing him by the arm, and as I was leaving, he looked at me and he said, "Frank, it really hurts."
Welcome.
Vince Lombardi, the famed football coach of the Green Bay Packers and later the Washington Redskins,
He is gravely ill in a Washington hospital and is said to be near death.
Lombardi's wife issued a statement at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, which said he was suffering from an extraordinarily virulent form of cancer. There are reports.
We'd heard on the 6 o'clock news that he was in the hospital, and then my mother subsequently called me that night or the next morning, I can't remember, saying it was serious business, and I better come out. My dad and I didn't communicate too well. I'm sure it was both of our faults. I never had any doubts my dad loved me, but he was hard. I had to probably grow up to his level, and I was probably getting there, but didn't have time.
He said, "Come here." And somehow he got his hand up, and he put my hand in his, and he just squeezed it. And then I realized that my mother was going to die.
Mr. Vincent Lombardi, coach and executive vice president of the Washington Redskins, died at 7:12 a.m. today at Georgetown University Hospital.
I usually wake up in the morning listening to Paul Harvey, and I opened up my eyes, it was raining, and I heard still can't talk about this.
It is a gray day in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
I heard Paul Harvey on the radio saying that the heavens were weeping in Green Bay because Vince Lombardi had passed away.
They said the town ran on Lombardi time, 15 minutes ahead of everywhere else. And elsewhere, in an era in which many sought to deify the common man, some of us continued to thrill to the accomplishments of the uncommon ones, Rockne, Leahy, Bud Wilkinson, Bear Bryant, and the incomparable Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi, in his uncompromising determination to be the best, could not alone inspire us all. Let that be his epitaph.
Unbelievable that this great man at age 57 had died. He was too darn tough and too mean to die, you know, but he died. It was something that nobody could really comprehend.
On Labor Day 1970, 4,000 mourners silently filled the streets of Midtown Manhattan. From every corner of America they came, the anonymous and the anointed. Players, executives, even mentors gathered their collective grief as they filed into St. Patrick's Cathedral. Vincent Thomas Lombardi was finally home.
Said it was the first time I really shed a tear at a white funeral, see? And it didn't mean it derogatorily. I was just trying to say that this guy, even though he was white, he was like a father to me.
The saddest part of his death was his players. You could see the sadness inside of them. He was amazing. He really was amazing.
Vince Lombardi fought the good fight. We believe in that last struggle with death, this man won the final victory.
We're in the car, and we went into Jersey. I went like this to my brother, and I said, look. And all these people, they were lined up on hills everywhere, waving the flag as my father went by. That made the day.
I think he had a profound effect on people. I think a lot of his players realized that they never would have come close to being the players and the human beings that they subsequently became without him. I don't know that you even had to be a player for him to feel that way. Just by his presence and the way he conducted himself, he had that strong faith. And yet he yelled, screamed at you, he would embarrass you. And if he did chew on you, it's because he thought at the moment that it was appropriate and that it would do you some good. He never did anything out of malice. He had a good heart. Everything came from his heart, really did. People say to me, oh, gee, couldn't have been easy. I say, you're right. But if it's 17, 16, 15, you'd say, okay, this is it. This is how it's all going to play out. I would have said, well, give me a pen. Where do I sign off? I think he would have done this.
Someone to give you a testimony, it's a very emotional type of thing. Gives you with great many thoughts, really, as to why and as to who and to where and whether you're particularly deserving. I'm very fortunate to be respected in my own profession. I think I've got to place a great deal of value on that. I've got to have a great deal of gratitude for my parents, for my wife, for my 2 children, and certainly for all of my superiors over the years. What I am today, let me put it that way, is all of these people were a part of it. Man should get, maybe at the end of his life, one testimony. Everybody should go through it once. Once is enough. As far as myself is concerned, I know my future happiness has to be some other place. I'm going to try to do these things as well as I can here in order to attain someday maybe a greater happiness. That's about the size of it.